All right. This one, I figured would be a good one for the two of us.
Oh boy.
Uh, Tell me a story about your first experiences programming or what got you
Oh.
into programming. Since you and
Oh.
I have both gone the software developer route, I thought that we would have some good stories to tell about it.
Yeah,
So,
man. Because I grew up in the age of Angel Fire. If you don't know what I'm talking about, congratulations. You're still a young person.
you, you
Capable.
might not wake up with daily back pain yet.
Yeah, yeah. Surprise! You don't take Advil daily to get through. Um, yeah, that's funny because when I think of programming, I think about more recently, like in the last 10 years, what I've learned versus learning HTML for the first time. Um, but if I were going to start and just be like programming anything, building websites when I was 14, 15, maybe. Back then there was like HTML was fairly, its websites were fairly simple. You know, the code was fairly simple. There were
And they
tags
all
and you
look
would
the
put stuff
same.
in. They were all the same, and everybody had a flaming fire horizontal bar and turned your mouse into a unicorn. That's when the web
Random
was
ones
pure.
would start randomly here and there, and yeah,
Yeah, it was great. I think I got into it because I was in a band. No, before I was into a band, I was really into Space Ghost Coast to Coast. It was my favorite cartoon. So
it's a
I
good
made
one.
a little Space Ghost Coast to Coast fan site on angelfire.com. And I remember it had like a web, it wasn't a what you see is what you get editor. That would have been too advanced for the time. We're talking 97, 98, something like that, but
Yeah,
it did
yeah.
have ways you could build a website with like layers. You kind of lay it out what you wanted it to say and text blocks and stuff.
GeoCities.
But there was an advanced tab, Joe, and that advanced tab was wonderful because it was just a blank text box. That was it. You could kind of get a lot of your stuff in, and then you'd go to the blank text box, and it would fill in what that code looked like, which was a really great way to learn. And when I learned how to right click a website and click view source, blew my mind. I felt like I was looking
Yep.
deep into the Matrix, which hadn't come out yet. But if we could use a current analogy for a time when it didn't exist, that's what it
you
was like.
you were on the grid.
Yeah. Yeah,
Tron
you were on the
reference.
grid, on the Tron grid. Yes. And I think I got into it because it was just it made me feel smart. Like it was simple HTML at the time, but it made me feel like I knew what I was doing. But like it's in terms of writing apps and stuff that did things, that's still fairly recent. I didn't get into that until my 30s. But a lot of what I wanted to do with that, I guess my late 20s, I was doing a little dabbling, but I wouldn't call myself a programmer. But it was mainly because I'm art brained. So you've had this experience too as a software developer where it's almost, as you're learning into it, it's almost very math heavy. Math is required, computer science degrees. Everybody's got to have like 14 maths.
Yeah, it's got a math foundation, and then it transforms into a bit more artistic brain because of how
Mhm.
the creativity that you need. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm bad at math. I've always been bad at math. My highest math I ever took was college algebra 1. I don't even know what that equates to. I never took a calculus, never took a trig, never took a geometry. And this is all for me to encourage the children that listen to this show, of which I'm sure there are many, that just because you can't do math, don't let it slow you down. Because I love to write, I love art, I love computers for the things I can do with them, and it hasn't, not knowing how to code random Fibonacci sequence level stuff, that wouldn't be random, but you know what I mean. It
Yeah.
I don't,
Well,
it
it
doesn't
depends
matter.
on what type of programming you want to do. There's a lot
Sure.
that you don't need to have those math basics, but the logical part of your brain that activates for math will
Mhm.
come hugely in handy when it comes to
Yeah.
programming.
You can know how to solve logic puzzles and do logic stuff without knowing calculus. I just need to
Yes.
know if this, then that. That's most of what programming is. And
Well, and when you get down to the nitty-gritty, I think it's more like putting together a puzzle
yes.
because you're finding little code. Like a lot of times if you don't know where to start, you consult Google, and
Mhm.
people have written little segments of code, and you take this segment of code and this segment of code, and you take all the different puzzle pieces and you put it all together.
Yeah.
So
It's not that different than the source code thing from a website. You're just working backwards. You're
yeah,
kind of going and grabbing stuff and then understanding it. And I think, like in today's day and age, where AI can help you do a lot, that's been a deep discussion around me and my coworkers and everyone I know that develops. Is like, what? Not now that we have AI assisted coding, does that mean anybody can code? And it's like, sort
sort of.
of. But I can code a lot of
Except
things. But
as long as it's not hallucinating.
yes, that's the
And
thing, Joe. Oh, go ahead.
well, and if you consult, Chat GPT or whatever you want, there's no guarantee that it will be up to the current standards either, because
Right.
it's pulling from stuff that's 10, 15, 20 years old, and it's completely outdated and won't help you in the current programming world, because it's full of all kinds of old standards or vulnerabilities or all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and I've seen examples recently of really good models. One example, I love this one. It was writing a Python function, and don't check out on me, listener. But it's writing a Python function, and it was just a function to say, like, to take some input. In this case, it was like a daily or weekly task list maker, and you could put DW and then enter, and then it would tell you like whether it's a daily task or whatever. But it had an array in it, which is basically a list of letters it would accept as input. It had a little d and a little w and a big D and a big W, which would make sense, right? Seems reasonable. Except further down the function, it took the input and it automatically lowercased it for you. So no matter what characters you put in, it was going to lowercase them. So by having uppercase D and W as valid choices, it was creating a longer array than necessary. And it might seem like that's a small mistake, because it is. But
Yep.
if you repeat that level of small mistake over 10,000 lines of code, then
Your
you end up with,
optimization sucks.
yeah, you're really not optimized. And we have AI that we're trusting to do those things. And then it's also potentially creating security holes. Like, is it doing input validation on forms and making sure you're not typing in drop tables and watching all hell break loose? Like, there's stuff that you need to know as a developer to look for to validate the things that are being written for you. But yeah, we're one beyond first experience programming. But
Well, and there's probably a lot of people that are checking out, and they're like, well, what does that matter? Small optimization stuff.
Mhm.
When you compound it, it becomes a huge issue. Like, I had an instance in my previous position where I was programming with somebody else. We were working on a project together, and he
Mhm.
got his stuff working in one of our environments, and then we moved it to another environment that had a much larger database, because it had data that we would use for testing with other companies, and so it had a lot more data in there because it was more actively used. And he went to run his stuff, and it was web based, and it completely timed out because it could not handle the load. And
Yep.
so I had to go through and completely re-optimize it to where, instead of, failing to load, which most web browsers, it takes about a minute before it just gives up.
Sure.
It can change based on web browser, but I got it to where it was loading the massive amount of data within 8 seconds, which is
Mhm.
still a long time to load a web page. But our production environment didn't have near the amount of volume, because the test one didn't get purged, and so
Oh,
it had,
okay.
yeah, it had data from decades and decades past, whereas the production stuff would get archived, or
Mm.
it would naturally roll off because it was completed, because I work for an insurance company, so when the claim is done, it purges off the list.
Yeah.
um it's still in the database, but it no longer affects the front end. Anyway, regardless. And so, yeah, those small optimizations, when taken in magnitude of, thousands, millions, possibly even billions, depending on what you're doing, makes a huge difference in scalability.
Yeah. Yeah. Over
And,
time, for
now
sure.
those that hadn't tuned out when you were talking have now tuned.
Now they're done. Going back to bed. No, so to answer the original question, yeah, I mean the first programming experience was in the job, baptism by fire. I got hired to be a Python developer, and I never looked at Python before. I don't know how I got the job. No clue. They gave me a shot because I'd done some other stuff, and they're like, you seem cool, you seem nice, you seem smart. Let's get you in here. And I just faked it till I made it, and I wrote some really bad code for a while. But we had a really great peer review process, and I think when you're learning to program for the first time, especially if you're doing stuff in open source or putting it out there where other people can see it, learning how to accept feedback is probably the most valuable thing I learned. Because there was a time where I didn't know how to take feedback, and everything that was said about it, I take it personally. I'm stupid.
Yep.
I'm bad. I'm the worst. And I finally, after working through it enough and meeting the people giving me feedback, the actual human beings on the other end, and knowing they were cool and we were hanging out and talking Star Wars a lot, I learned it wasn't me they didn't like. It was my code they didn't like. So when they didn't like the code, I learned how to blame my own code. Like, not me. Just go, okay, this code does suck. They're not wrong. I know how to fix it. Let me redo it, and getting guidance, having somebody with you, that wants you to be better and help you be better is a huge component of it.
And not only that, once you've got more experience, you'll look back at your own code and be like, yeah, no, it sucked.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And even now, like 8 years into a career programming, look back at it, I'm like, a year ago, I'm like, who wrote this? And then I get blame on the code. I'm like, oh, I wrote it. That's okay.
So, like my first experience writing actual code and not like those little helper things that you're not really doing the code. My first time writing actual code was actually my graphing calculator, my TI 83 plus.
Wow.
So our math book in high school had one example program in it. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And so I messed around with the calculator. I got it put in there, and it was real basic. It you put in the inputs for a formula, and it spit out the answer for you. And I'm like, okay, well, I can work with this. And over the course of the next couple of years, I made a pretty in-depth program that had dozens of functions that you just plug in the variables and it spits out the answer. So like quadratic formula, boom, put in ABC, it spits it out for me, and things like that. And I even went up to a couple of my teachers, and I'm like, okay, I've put this on my calculator. It will give me the answer for me. Am I allowed to use this on the test? And a couple of them were like, if you know the formula well enough to program it, you're good. You can use it on the test.
Wow.
And so, I was honest with them. And then a few of them were like, you can use it on there to double check, but you still need to show your work.
Okay.
Like, that's fair.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but they even got to the point where they were like, okay, everyone, you got to purge the memory on your calculator. Well, okay, all I got to do is archive it, and then it won't get purged when you do the purge.
Oh, wow.
So there were ways you could archive programs so that when you did a clear memory, it didn't actually clear the program, which that would have sucked because at that point, I didn't have a computer that I could hook it up to and back it up with. But you can hook up those to a computer and do the programming on the computer. But I didn't have that. I was doing all the programming on my calculator. There were even a couple of students that were like, "Hey, can I get that?" I'm like, "Sure, give me $5." So I sold it to a couple of students.
That's amazing.
So yes, that was my first experience with programming, and then I think my junior year, I took a C++ class in high school. And while a lot of the other kids were playing Unreal Tournament because all of this stuff was networked together,
Sure.
while I did that occasionally, but most of the time I was getting done with what we were supposed to do because you couldn't exactly have homework because everything's there. At that point, you weren't expected to have a computer at home. Dating ourselves.
Yeah.
but off to the side, I was like, okay, there was a huge boom on Texas Hold'em
Mhm.
on ESPN, and so I was like, okay, can I program Texas Hold'em in C++? And so I ended up doing it. Granted, there's no AI; it always just matched your bet
Okay,
automatically,
yeah.
but it had full it was just you against the computer. It had full hand comparison. It went through every step. And so looking back on it, I can remember little snippets of how I coded it, and it's atrocious, but it worked.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds awesome. You had my mind actually working through, like, how I would have done it. That's amazing.
And so my teacher ended up letting me skip the final project and let me turn that in as the final project. Um, and so it was pretty. I was happy about it. She was happy about it. It
Yeah.
it ended up working out really well. So
I have 2 questions that have come to mind. First
okay,
question, were you a good kid, Joe? Did you have a reputation for being the good, gets his work done kid?
maybe
Okay.
yes, yes.
No, okay, that's fine
I
because I was too. I was the good kid, so, like, I could get away with stuff other people couldn't get away with.
There was one time in high school where I got sent to the principal's office, and I was like, "What's going on?" Apparently, they had started a good referral process where you got sent to the principal's office. They called your parents and told them something great that you had done at school,
That's
and so
amazing.
I got sent to the office with no context and didn't realize that this was a thing, and they're just playing it all straight face. We're gonna call your parents now. I'm like, what the heck did I do? I'm
That's
just
the
sitting there
best thing.
thinking, and and then they start praising me. I'm like, oh, okay.
This doesn't shock me somehow. I had a similar story that I got sent to the principal's office in 5th grade for popping a bag in the lunchroom, and I think it scared the crap out of the principal. But it was because a kid next to me wouldn't leave me alone and kept telling me, like, pop it, pop it, pop it, pop it. So I finally did it. So I get to sent to the principal's office, and I'm like crying because I've never been to the principal's office before. And when I finally get to leave, he never like came in or did anything. They just eventually told me I could go. I got back to my classroom, and the kid that had told me to do the thing was in there writing sentences on the board. And my teacher was like, "Steven, I told him you don't, this isn't you. You don't do that stuff. Go play it. Go to the playground." I was like, wow, okay, this is what having a good reputation will earn you. But yeah, good
Yeah,
kid power.
I got in trouble a couple of times in middle school. There was once
Sure.
where I was I don't know why. I don't remember even where I got them. I had some staples, like just like the full thing of staples, and I was picking them off one by one and throwing them at my friend. And so I got detention for that at one
Yeah.
point. Which me and my friend both got it. So we just
Yeah.
our detention was helping the janitor clean up the school. So we're just having fun being ourselves and just kind of sort of helping out.
Yeah. Nice
Um,
punishment.
yeah, there was
Yeah.
once where I woke up and I was half asleep and I grabbed the wrong shirt and we had a uniform. And so my shirt was the wrong color.
Uh-oh.
And so I was like, oh, because we had to wear either green or white, which were the school colors of polos.
Yeah.
And mine was like a blue green shirt that I had
Oh,
grabbed.
oh no.
And so I got sent to the principal's office. And at that point, I was on the wrestling team.
Mhm.
And so the principal, he saw me all the time coming in early for wrestling weigh-ins, because you always do your weigh-ins in the morning where you're the lowest amount of weight because you haven't eaten anything.
Yeah.
And so he was like, yeah, I know you didn't do it on purpose, and he gave me a sticker that was like, you're good for today type of thing.
Oh, nice.
So basically, it's a casual day for you.
Joe gets a casual day. I love it. I
And
remember getting sent to detention one time because it was my 11th grade year, and I still had this folder. In 11th grade, we had this folder through all of high school where you had to bring it home, bring it back to school with your parents and signed it with the work, So it's just basically
yeah,
to say they'd done the work. I always forgot to get my parents to sign it all the time. And so I'd get these demerits And these or merit losses is what we called them. Anyway, like, and it would compound. So the first time you're unprepared, which is what a missing Friday folder was, I'd get one, and then another one, then two, then three, and three. Anyway, when you got to less than 90 merits, because you started with 100, you had detention. So I just signed up, like, okay, I guess I'm going to detention. They'll probably let me know when. And I never went for like weeks. I had no idea until my friend was like, "Did you ever serve detention?" And I said, they didn't tell me to. I didn't know when I was supposed to do it. He runs and tells the teacher, "Hey, do you know Steven hasn't served his detention?" So she comes to get me and she says, "Steven, go serve detention." I said, "I don't know what to do. I've never been this in trouble before." So they sent me to detention, and I'm sitting in the detention hall, and one of the gym teacher, who was like the sheriff at the time, comes in and he looks around and he goes, "Steven, what are you doing here?" I was like, "I forgot my Friday folder like 10 times." And he was just like, "What? Friday? Go home." I was like, "Okay." It was the best. It was the best. But I did have one other question for you that was related to our programming conversation. And that question is, your first experience with a computer, where did you get to see one, and why? What did it captivate you enough where you're like, that's something I'm going to need to mess with, and I want to have for myself at some point?
So the first time I saw a computer was at my dad's office, because he used it for his bookkeeping and whatnot. And that computer ended up crapping out on him, and he brought it home.
Oh,
And so I turned it on, and my dad was like, "I don't even know how to get this to start." and I remember you just had to hit whatever key, but I typed in start and hit enter, and thinking, "Oh, I cracked the code." But later I tried a few different things, and it didn't matter what you put in there. You just whatever. and all that it had on there was Snake. And so
oh,
I
nice.
used it to play Snake. Whereas the one he replaced it with in his office, it had this game on it where you each were gorillas, and you set the angle and velocity that you threw these exploding bananas. And so
Yeah.
you're up on skyscrapers trying to blow up the opponent's gorilla by setting the different angles. And yeah, that was
Oh,
a
that
fun
sounds
game.
great. Yeah.
But yeah, but when I started playing with the computer at home, I remember, and I was probably 9, 10. My dad was like, "You need to do something with computers."
Yeah.
And back then, like, uh, the jobs for computers were pretty limited.
Yeah,
Back
you had to be a genius to get a computer job.
Yeah. And so he was like, "You need to do something with computers." And I obviously that ended up working out. It actually wasn't. It wasn't. Even with all the programming stuff I did in high school, that wasn't my initial career goal when I went to college.
Oh, what was your initial career goal?
So my initial plan was to become an actuary.
Well,
So you
wow.
were
Okay.
you were talking about how you hate math,
Yeah.
and I took calculus my senior year of high school, AP calculus, and yeah, so I started college with like 10 or 12 math credits from taking AP calculus.
Dang.
So
All right,
yeah.
nerd.
Well, and that's so my senior year, I only went to school half the time because I had work release in the afternoon.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was working full time and going to school for half the day, and part of that half the day was calculus. And so yeah, so I was taking some college courses in high school and working full time
Dang, that's
my senior
amazing.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done. Gosh, smart people. I don't know what to do with you.
But yeah, yes, that was that.
Mm.
I had sorry, I'm gonna backtrack back. You were talking about how you exploded the chip bag and got in trouble.
Yeah.
It made me think of a story that I had from my seventh or eighth grade year, where I was sitting in class in my reading class, and we had a substitute teacher that day. And I think I was tapping my foot on the ground or something, but the the girl sitting behind me, apparently that made her very, very, very angry. And she didn't ask me to stop or anything, but it triggered her so bad. She walked up to my desk, grabbed all of my stuff, and threw it across the room.
Oh my gosh.
And so the teacher just assumed that we were both in the wrong and sent us both to in-school suspension.
Geez.
And the teacher later apologized because the entire class was like, Joe didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The rest of the class stood up for me, and she apologized afterward, but she didn't come and get me to take me. I spent the rest of that period in school suspension. So
she understood, but she couldn't show the class her weakness.
It was in private later that she apologized. But oh man, well, because I want to say normally if you got in school suspension, you also had like detention or something else that went along with it.
Oh, okay.
Like it wasn't just that, and so I didn't have to do the secondary punishment. It was just the one part. But
oh, good.
Yeah,
that would have been a grave injustice. They would have planted flags all over the school. Your classmates would have rioted. It would have been a whole thing.
So my whole punishment for doing nothing except tapping my foot was to sit in that room seething at the injustice of it all.
When I get out of this room, I'll show them what for.
My teenage angst.
They'll never hear the last of Joe Ard. They'll rue the day.
Oh, man.